Hello and welcome to this Biopsychology multiple choice questions video brought to you by Tutor2U. All of the questions that you're going to see on this video today are based on the Advanced Information 2022, which will help form part of your paper 2 in the Biopsychology section. So just before we get started, just a disclaimer that all the materials used on this course are produced by Tutor2U and they are intended to reflect the style of questions and mark schemes present on AQA A-Level Psychology exams, which are available in the public domain. So let's get started. Firstly, you just need to make sure that you have a pen or a pencil and a piece of paper handy. You're going to see some multiple choice questions come up on the screen. You'll have a little bit of time to write down your answer of which one you think is correct, and then the correct answer will be shown on the following slide so you can check whether you were correct or not. Okay, so all the multiple choice questions you're about to see are all around understanding the question. So the first question you've got is, which of the following is not an example of a neuron? Is it A, motor, B, sensory, C, excitatory, or D, relay? So just have a couple of seconds now to write down which one you think is not an example of a neuron. Well done if you chose the answer C, excitatory. That is not an example of a neuron. Motor, sensory and relay are all different types of neurons you need to know as part of your biopsychology topic. You need to know the structure of them, the function of them, whereabout they are located. As for the word excitatory, or the key term excitatory, that is more involved in synaptic transmission. So I won't tell you what that means right now, as we've got questions coming up a bit later on synaptic transmission, but well done if you chose that one as being the odd one out. Okay, so question number 2. Which of the following is not part of the peripheral nervous system? Is it A, the autonomic nervous system, B, the somatic nervous system, C, the sympathetic nervous system, or D, the brain? So again, a couple of seconds, just write down the letter of the one which you think is not part of the peripheral nervous system. Okay, well done if you went with the answer D, the brain. Hopefully you were able to identify that the brain is not part of the peripheral nervous system and is in fact part of the central nervous system. Just remember, the central nervous system is made up of the brain and the spinal cord, and it's not part of the peripheral nervous system. Question number 3 now. Which part of the nervous system is responsible for helping us return to our equilibrium after stress? Is it A, the sympathetic nervous system, B, the parasympathetic nervous system, C, the spinal cord, or D, the somatic nervous system? Well done if you identified the correct letter as being B, the parasympathetic nervous system. Now remember, the parasympathetic nervous system is part of your nervous system which is responsible for kind of bringing everything back down once the fight or flight mode has been activated, once adrenaline has passed through the body when you are put in danger or a stressor has been placed in front of you. The parasympathetic nervous system is what is going to bring your body back down to that state of equilibrium. This is where you're going to feel things like your heart rate start to decrease, your blood pressure is going to start to reduce. But essentially this does take a little bit longer to kick back in than the sympathetic nervous system. And it can explain why sometimes if you've had a shock or someone has jumped out on you, it might take your body a little bit of time to come down from it. Sometimes you say things like, oh, I'm still coming down from that before. That is because the parasympathetic nervous system does take a little bit longer to kick back in. Question number 4 now. Which neuron is responsible for passing messages to and from other neurons? Is it A, motor neuron, B, the relay neuron, C, sensory neuron, or D, the helper neuron? Again, well done if you identified the correct answer as being B, the relay neuron. So the relay neuron is the neuron which passes information to and from the sensory neuron and the motor neuron. If you are struggling to remember your three different types of neurons, imagine your relay neuron as being the person who's in the relay race, passing the baton to and from the other two neurons either side of it. So you've got your sensory neuron, the relay neuron passing the baton to and from, and the motor neuron. Question number 5 now, and this one might be a little bit more difficult compared to the others. It has appeared in an exam in previous years. So which of the following explains why synaptic transmission can only travel one way? Is the answer A, the receptor sites are found on the postsynaptic neuron? B, the postsynaptic neuron can only send messages? C, the presynaptic neuron sends messages in two directions? Or D, receptor sites are only found on the presynaptic neuron? Well done if you identified A as being the correct answer here. Now, the reason why synaptic transmission can only travel in one direction is because once the chemical messages have passed over the synapse and they are reaching the postsynaptic neuron, there are only receptor sites found on this postsynaptic neuron. There are no receptor sites which are found on the presynaptic neuron. So they can only physically get picked up in one direction. They can only get passed in one direction. So for question number 6, this is a little bit of a longer one now, so I will pause the video for a little bit longer just so you have time to properly read through each one and decide which one is your correct answer. So the question is, which of the following describes excitation in a synaptic transmission? So excitation, this was the key term which I said we will come back to from number 1. So is the answer A, excitatory neurotransmitters, for example noradrenaline, make the postsynaptic cell more likely to fire? If an excitatory neurotransmitter, like noradrenaline, binds to the postsynaptic receptors, it will cause an electrical charge in the cell membrane, which results in an excitatory postsynaptic potential, which makes the postsynaptic cell more likely to fire. Is it B? Inhibitory neurotransmitters, for example noradrenaline, make the postsynaptic cell more likely to fire. If an inhibitory neurotransmitter, like noradrenaline, binds to the postsynaptic receptors, it will cause an electrical charge in the cell membrane, which results in an inhibitory postsynaptic potential, which makes the postsynaptic cell more likely to fire. Is it C? If an inhibitory neurotransmitter, like GABA, binds to the postsynaptic receptors, it will result in an inhibitory postsynaptic potential, which makes the postsynaptic cell less likely to fire. Or is it D? Information is passed down the axon of the neuron as an electrical impulse known as action potential, which causes excitation. Well done if you identified A as being the correct answer here. So excitation is all about, is that action potential more likely to fire on the postsynaptic neuron? If you have an excitatory neurotransmitter, such as noradrenaline, then it's going to create the action potential in the postsynaptic cell more likely to fire. If it's inhibitory, then it's going to be less likely to fire. Question number 7. Which of the following methods of studying the brain involves the patient wearing electrodes? Now this time you need to make sure you select 2 answers. So is it an EEG, an ERP, a post-mortem, or an fMRI scan? So remember to choose 2 letters on this one. Which of the following methods of studying the brain involves the patient wearing electrodes? Okay, hopefully a nice straightforward one for you, that one. So well done if you went for A and B. An EEG and an ERP are methods of studying the brain which will involve the patient wearing electrodes. Question number 8. Which of the following methods of studying the brain is criticised for being bidirectional? Is it A, an EEG, B, an ERP, C, a post-mortem, or D, an fMRI scan? So the correct answer for this one was C, post-mortem. So this is one of the biggest criticisms of post-mortem research, is that it's often bidirectional. We use it a lot for post-mortem because when we look at someone's brain once they've passed, we don't know if that's what someone's brain looked like when they were born or what their brain has become over time through things like medication and aging. Or if we take someone with schizophrenia, for example, and we do a post-mortem, we might find things like thicker ventricles in the brain. We don't know if that's what's caused the schizophrenia or whether the ventricles have gotten thicker because of schizophrenia. And that's the same with any condition really when we're using a post-mortem. So one of the biggest criticisms of post-mortem research is that there are problems with it being bidirectional. Question number 9. Which of the following methods of studying the brain uses the magnetic qualities of deoxygenated blood? Is it an A, EEG, B, ERP, C, post-mortem, or D, fMRI scan? So the answer for this one was, of course, D. An fMRI scan uses the magnetic qualities of deoxygenated blood when studying the brain. Question number 10, and this time again you've got to select two answers. So which of the following methods of studying the brain involves presenting patients with stimuli to measure the reaction of the brain? Is it A, an EEG, B, an ERP, C, post-mortem, or D, fMRI scan? So make sure this time you select two answers. Well done if you went for B and D. The correct answers were an ERP and an fMRI scan. So these are both measures which involve using stimuli to then measure the reaction of the brain and how the brain responds to that stimuli. Question number 11. Which of the following are used to investigate the hemispheric lateralization of brain function? Is it A, split brain patients, B, bilingual patients, C, medical students, or D, taxi drivers? So which of the following are used to investigate the hemispheric lateralization of brain function? Well done if you identified A, split brain patients, as being the correct answer for this one. Again, you need to identify two answers for question number 12. So which of the following best describes the method used by Sperry to investigate hemispheric functioning of the brain with split brain patients? A picture was presented to either the left or right visual field, and the participant had to describe what they saw. Participants were given a list of words to memorise, and their ability to recall the words in order was recorded for each participant. That's B. C. Participants were presented with a picture in either their left or right visual field, and they had to draw what they saw. And D. Participants had to look at the pictures of animals and name how many legs each animal had to demonstrate their spatial abilities. So make sure for this one you identify two answers which are correct for Sperry. Well done if you identified A and C as being the correct. So remember, with Sperry's research, we're looking at the left or right visual fields to try and work out the hemispheric function of the brain with split brain patients. So A was the picture presented to either the left or right visual field, and then the participant had to describe what they saw. And C, participants were presented with a picture in either their left or right visual fields again, and they had to draw what they saw. Question number 13 now. Again, another two answer one. Which of the following are strengths of split brain research into the hemispheric lateralization of brain function? Is it A, Rogers et al. 2004, who found that in a domestic chicken, brain lateralization is associated with an enhanced ability to perform two tasks simultaneously, finding food and being vigilant for predators? Was it B, research by Turk et al. 2002, who discovered a patient who suffered damage to the left hemisphere but developed the capacity to speak in the right hemisphere, eventually leading to the ability to speak about the information presented to either side of the brain? Is it C, the methodology used is standardized and therefore research can be replicated? Or D, the samples used in split brain research are specific and have often undergone a rare surgery, meaning they're not representative of the general population? Well done if you identified A and C as being the correct answers. So with this one, B was actually a counter finding and D is obviously a weakness of the research because the samples are very specific to that one person. So we can't generalize them to a wider population. Question number 14, hopefully a nice straightforward one for you. So which of the following are language centers in the brain? Is it Broca, Wernicke, the cerebellum, or grey matter? Again, two answers for this one. So hopefully you all went correct with this one. Of course, the correct two answers were Broca's area and Wernicke's area, so A and B. So Broca's area and Wernicke's area are both parts of the brain which are associated with language. Sometimes we hear of disorders called Broca's aphasia or Wernicke's aphasia, and this is when somebody tends to have difficulty with their speech or difficulty with their language. Okay, this time you've got a really short case study. So Pauline has got damage to the left side of her brain in the frontal lobe region or the motor cortex area. Which of the following is she likely to experience? Again, choose two answers for this one. Is she likely to have difficulty when producing sounds, difficulty understanding speech and sound, difficulties with movement and coordination, or difficulties in processing visual information? Well done if you went with A and C here. So yeah, the frontal lobe region is difficulty producing sound, and obviously with the motor cortex as well, this is difficulties with movement and coordination. Pauline is probably going to find that she experiences. Remember, every time you see that word motor, it tends to be associated with movement of some sort. So that is one of the key buzzwords you need to be looking out for. Okay, nearly there now. So question number 16. Which of the following refers to the functional recovery of the brain after trauma? A, the brain's ability to change and adapt because of experience. B, biological rhythms that balance themselves after injury. C, the transfer of functions from a damaged area of the brain after trauma to other undamaged areas. Or D, rehabilitation of the brain after injury through coaching and mentoring. So it's just one answer we need for this one. Well done if you identified C as being the correct answer here. So yes, if someone has experienced brain trauma or brain injury and a certain part of their brain has stopped working or some of the functions within that area have stopped working as well, then sometimes the brain is able to transfer these functions from a damaged area of the brain to other undamaged areas. And if somebody's able to do that, if somebody's brain is able to do that, this is what we mean by the functional recovery of the brain, when they're able to pass other functions from that damaged area to a different undamaged area within the brain. Number 17, so Maguire et al. Found that the posterior hippocampal volume of London taxi drivers' brains was positively correlated with their time as a taxi driver, and that there were significant differences between the taxi drivers' brains and those of controls. What does this study support? Is it A, the brain is not capable of change, no matter how old you are or what occupation you do. B, the brain can permanently change in response to frequent exposure to a particular task. C, brain function is both localized and fixed at a certain age. Or D, the brain matures as you get older. So the Maguire et al. Study, what does it support? Well done if you identified the correct answer as being B. So yeah, of course, the Maguire et al. Study supports that the brain can permanently change in response to frequent exposure to a particular task. Okay, nearly finished now. So question number 18. Which of the following is a positive implication of research into the functional recovery of the brain? Is it A, neurorehabilitation, understanding and interventions? B, medication to treat syndromes originating in brain dysfunction? C, CBT to strengthen areas of the brain? Or D, person-centered therapy to improve self-actualization? So a huge well done if you got the last question of this video right. A is the correct answer here. So a positive implication of research into the functional recovery of the brain is that now we have neurorehabilitation understanding and interventions that can be put in place to support brain recovery. Okay, so that's now the end of our multiple choice questions. Make sure you add up your answers, see how you got on. Hopefully you perform really well. If not, don't worry, this can be a really helpful and useful video for you to be able to identify some of your areas that might just need a little bit more of your attention within the biopsychology unit. So if you identified any questions that you really struggled with, that might be a great idea just to go back and revisit that area before your exam. So well done and good luck.